Well, the holidays are just about over, aren't they? Whatever you ended up celebrating this month, I do hope it went well for you. Here, it was Christmas, which means there's a few things underneath the Christmas tree that I think need a little bit of reviewing. And since I'm still in the midst of Toycember and just about done with that one, we're going to keep it to the stuff that I have on hand, which is stuff that was under the tree. That includes this guy. This is Webdiver Griffion. Now, I've talked about Webdiver on rare occasion on the channel, and I really do like this toy line. This is what was supposed to replace Transformers in 2001 when Takara wanted to give it a rest. It didn't go well. Yeah, there's only 13 figures in this main line, and they didn't make a sequel series or anything, so you can see that they didn't really take to this toy line, but it's weird and random and kind of obscure, and I want to talk about a bit of it. So, we have Griffion as a very powder blue jet, looking quite futuristic, quite good. He's got a lot of typical fighter jet elements, of course, but then you get into a lot of the other tech detail going on. You see, Webdiver was all about cyberspace, so everyone kind of has these super heavily detailed Tron lines going through in some very bright neon color that typically clashes with their primary color scheme to stand out. Here, it is a bright green, and I do like how the green looks on the blue. The first thing you're going to notice here is, he's one of those that kind of wears his alt mode on his back and his robot mode on his belly. That's just how it goes sometimes, even when they're not doing Transformers. That's pretty much how some of these jets go. But there is some merit to it. The front end does have a completely translucent cockpit, so we can actually see through, and that's kind of nice. Nothing to see underneath, but hey, what are you going to do? There's a lot of heavy sculpted detailing, a lot of little panel lines all over. You can see what's supposed to be an intake, but there's no need for it since it's a digital jet. And then you can see along the sides of the wings, you get a lot more of that tech detail and lines that could have been painted but were left off. In the rear, we have what looks like thruster engines, but this is kind of a weird one because they don't really lock in anywhere. They just kind of hinge and float there, and yeah, I don't know. They're going for something, but it does not quite end up working correctly. On the upside, you do have landing gear. Landing gear does fold up on all fronts, especially there. So at least they worked in a little bit of those kind of tricks. Now, he does have a bit of gimmick to him, but we don't really need to see it in this mode. The only thing there really is these launching missiles, which are completely translucent launchers, and it's a pressure launch missile, which means, well, if the plastic's getting a little bit brittle, that's going to crack right away. So that's why we're not firing it on camera this time. So, yeah, it's an okay jet mode. It's got a lot of undercarriage to it, and it's got these big Griffin talons hanging out the back that I didn't even mention before because I try so hard to ignore them. We're going to get this guy into robot mode. Now, I will mention one of the gimmicks to Webdiver is that most of the figures can combine onto the lead figure, Griffion, and when combined, it creates this very basic armor mode. Now, I would show you that on this one, but Griffion's a little bit hard to pull down. He's mostly clear plastic, and that's pretty much what the torso mode, pretty much what the armor mode looks like. It's just that kind of folded down with the guns folded up to point forward. I will say, a lot of heavy paint and detail to make that chest mode look a little bit more interesting. Red for I assume if you want weapons, I guess. But yeah, just a ton of that green to make it stand out and make it look different. And you do have some detailing, but we're going to see a lot more of that when we transform. Of course, as the hinge has decided for me that we're going to flip the front end up first to reveal the beast mode head. I can call it a beast mode, but yeah, that's not quite correct, as you'll see. We'll fold that head down just to get out of the way. The legs rotate out like that. No heels or anything, so just stick them up straight. The arms don't peg in any way. They just kind of hang out underneath the wings, and that's unfortunate, so we can move those away. Now, all of this has to now rotate 180 degrees to bring the wings up to behind his shoulders. From there, we can fold out the extensions on the wings, give them a fuller look. The launchers, we can rotate forward. It's on a clear plastic ball joint, which has me very concerned, considering this toy is about 15 years old now. And I'm going to fold all of this back down so we have a bit of a tail fin thing going on. And that's pretty much it in a nutshell. Let me see if I can get him in a decent standing position. And like so, I'll give you a little bit of adjustment. There is your Griffion in what is supposed to be a robot mode. Now, the thing about Webdiver is rarely did they have a robot mode. Generally, it's a very bestial-looking robot, or sometimes it's just a straight-up animal. That's one of the things that Webdiver did to stand apart from Transformers, for better or worse sometimes, and we'll let you judge which one this turned out to be. For starters, of course, we're going to look at the head close up. Of course, since he is Griffin-based, it is something more akin to an eagle's head with a large beak and a lot of black detailing lining all the way around the yellow helmet. There is that green again going all the way across the side. It's kind of getting washed out because of the yellow here. And little beady eye. He's got some little details. There's a lot of paint going on the head, so that I do appreciate. You get the dark blue, you get most of the colors of the toy, and a little bit of gray on those intakes there on the side. Body itself does have a very different look. It's one thing about figures that wear the alt mode on their back is you can kind of get a lot more detail out of them that you don't normally see. You can see big blue chest was not visible in any way. You can see more of that green detailing as well as his own personal little emblem there on the front. All Web Knights have some kind. They're called Web Knights in the show. Just to clarify. Yeah, all of them have their own little emblem, just so you can identify who is who, I guess. But besides that, details I really like, well, you do have the painted blue sections here that give the legs a little bit more of a bird-like appearance. Some more around here, and even though these are supposed to be the big lion paws, which they do have the molding for, and some detail that does vaguely resemble claws, even though they're not molded in, solid blocks instead. You can see more of that sharp green detail, again, against the yellow. It doesn't look as good as when it's against the blue. Kind of blends a little bit too much. I really, really like the detail on the wings. Again, you get a lot more of that techie detail, a lot more of that really fine panel work, and all the lining of all the different feathers. Very nicely done. So, beyond that, what can this guy do? Well, you do have articulation around here. Nothing in the head rotates, unfortunately, which is a downside. But you do have two hinges along the neck, as well as a beak that can open up. A little bit of flick there. There we go. And we get the mouth. There we go. That can get the mouth open. Universal shoulders. They rotate and they move up and down. They have a really good range. The elbows, beyond 90 degree. That's always a nice thing to see. They work a little bit the other way, too, which is kind of weird. Nothing in the waist. The hips kind of get on my nerves a little bit because everything in here is linear motion. There's no rotation. There's no outward movement. It is just that hinges that way, that hinges that way, that hinges that way. So you can pretty much just straighten the leg and move it back and forward, but you can't really do anything kind of pose-worthy with him. That's the unfortunate thing, is that even though he has engineering for all these kind of poses and such, he's a pretty standard guy, and the shape of him as just like, okay, he's supposed to be a griffin, right? But that's about the best he stands, which is very much not a griffin. No, this is like a winged gorilla is what this is. I don't know what you call a gorilla eagle mix. This is not the island of Dr. Moreau here, but God, no one gets that reference. But it does get a little bit frustrating because on one hand, if you want him in some kind of upright robot mode, he can kind of get there, but there's so many hinges in the legs that kind of relies on everything being nice and tight. And he can't really get into a proper griffin stance because the front legs are so long. Does not quite look right. It's just a little bit weird, I guess. So I did mention he has just a little bit of gimmick to him, and that's because Webdivers all have this kind of gimmick to them. I point you at this. Yeah, it's just a little LED flashing in the chest. Kind of illuminates his logo, but not really. Hang on. My autofocus does not like that. So the whole thing here is that when you combine these guys with Griffion, the armor mode can actually transfer to an inbuilt video game inside Griffion. It's one of those direct plug-and-play type games for your TV. Well, for your old TV. Most TVs these days don't have the cable plugs for it. But if they did, you could plug it in and play a little mini-game with Griffion on screen, and you could use these guys as upgrades in-game. That little button does flash that little light on his chest, but it also sends an IR signal that tells Griffion what figure is attached to him and gives him that upgrade in the game, which is kind of a really neat gimmick. The game is kind of lame, and Griffion was like super expensive because, hey, it's a giant transformer with an entire video game built into him. So it did not really take off, though I do think the functionality is neat, and these days you kind of get that in your Games to Life franchises. So it didn't entirely go away. That's kind of a prototype of it, I guess, but it was a noble effort back in 2001. This might have worked a little bit better today. If you can come up with a video game scanning system that could actually turn into a robot, you might actually have something. But for now, they just kind of stand as really unusual versions of transforming toy lines. So that's pretty much Griffion in a nutshell. As far as Webdiver goes, he's probably the least impressive of the line. The blue and yellow kind of works for me. The green is a little bit bright on the yellow, so it kind of washes out. But other than that, I don't know. He's very basic, isn't he? The transformation really isn't too complex. The vehicle mode looks great. The robot mode is, well, what can you do? So, I don't know, he's kind of a mixed bag as far as Webdiver figures go. There are far better toys in the line, far more creative as far as transformation and design elements go. He's just kind of there, which I think is why I put him off till the end. I got all the rarest Webdivers before I ended up with this guy as the last of the line. But hey, I'm happy to have him. He's not a terrible toy by any means. He's just from a different age, and just not quite up to par with the rest of his line.